Well, we will see during this presentation this drug life cycle in detail, but let me present and introduce you very briefly these concepts. I'm sure that you are, well, you know very well all of them, and we will try to go deeply on each of them in the next section. But just to have a rough idea, we're talking about years. We're talking for every single step that we want to go from discovery to preclinical testing. We're talking about between 3 and 5 years in order to have finished this step. Clinical testing, we're talking about between 6 and 9. And we need 2 more years in order to have the approval. Well, in all those activities, the pharmaceutical industry, when we talk about top big pharma companies, they have to dedicate specifically large teams, large infrastructures, and large sub-companies to each of these actions. And this is something that they have already done. And nowadays, the type or the kind of drugs that seems to be the more competitive and the more compelling in the pharmaceutical industry are not based on these stages, let me say. So if we talk about classical drugs, chemical drugs based on chemical principles, everyone knows how much difficult it is to put in the market this kind of drugs. But if we talk about cell gene therapies, if we talk about ATMPs, advanced therapeutic medicine products, if we talk about this kind of medicines, this is another thing. We're talking about different things. In this case, they see a different top to market position that could be more interesting for their business. So that means that for the reason, these kind of stages are really interesting for third companies, third parties, as could be CDMOs and CMOs. And we will see which kind of benefits or which kind of opportunities we can have as a CRO, CDMO, or CMO in front of competitors and also in front of potential customers. How we can be more attractive based on each stage. And I like this slide because it's presenting very well not only the scope of each concept, CRO, CDMO, CMO, also because it's showing the overlapping. I think that this is the most interesting part. So between CROs and CDMOs, we see that we can have an overlapping in drug product and development. So clinical phases from since 1 to 3, it seems that could be covered by both concepts, CDMO and CRO. And I don't know if you have in mind this kind of services, this kind of products that you can sell to your customers or your pharma companies, but you should always have in mind that this intersection could cover maybe a differential point. If you are thinking CDMO, you have to know that you will compete with CMOs. And in this case, we have more intersection with other specialized CMOs. So depending on who you want to be like, or depending on where you would like to be positioned, maybe a good point to start is, let's think about how we need to compete against other services or similar services that are in the market that they are covering similar things plus something else that we are not doing. Well, this other graphic, we're talking here about the landscape. Could you see how many logos we have? And there are not all of them. I'm just putting the largest CDMOs and CMOs landscape. In this case, we see some of them like Pythion that has been acquired by Thermo Fisher, that they are being positioned not only in discovery, process and scale up, also in finished dose manufacturing. So this is more clear CMO. But we see also Adair or Lonza that they are covering more aspects. The thing is that it seems that this is very different world between packaging and logistics rather than production, manufacturing, discovery, and API. Okay, so it seems that the packaging and logistics distribution world is completely is describing or establishing a clear barrier between the rest of activities. So it's something that you have to consider also regarding the potential tasks or initiative where you can be involved. And more, the next one is I would like to compare the pharmaceutical market, the CDMO, the CMO, and the CRO market. Well, I think that this graphic, although it seems that it's a little bit a mess, it's really clear regarding how the growth, expected growth, again, we're taking the same index, the same indicator, the compound annual growth rate, how this rate is describing very well how the CMOs and CROs, they are being increased in three periods. While the pharma companies, this is based on these bubbles that they are here in white, they are not very well positioned in this growth. We see here two pharma big bullets that they are growing a lot. We see here other pharma companies that they are growing, but many of them, they are around this static position. While we see CMOs and CROs that they are being very well positioned. So the profitability is more clear in these CMOs and CROs. I think that this graphic is really important to see and to have as a reference, because it's a very good evidence about the real state of the art in terms of drug manufacturing. Nowadays, pharmaceuticals companies, big pharma companies, are restructuring, are completely remaking their strategies in order to point out to a new way to produce drugs. And this is not the classical one. They try to delegate as much as they can their large productions to CMOs and CDMOs. And this is what we can see in the next slide. So we're talking about news, also very recent news. In this case, I'm attaching one of my last articles. So I published with William, with Whitford, this article in the ISP, in the pharmaceutical engineering, how artificial intelligence is the new promise for advanced therapeutic medicine products. This is very interesting to read because we're describing with evidence why ATMPs are becoming more and more an objective for big pharma companies. And what happened with CDMOs and CRO trends? Well, the thing is that all these kind of activities that requires more agility, that requires to be more efficient and to cover broad production, because we're global, because there is emergencies, whatever kind of reason you can imagine, are being translated, are being delegated into third parties. Finally, this article coming, this is very recent again. Novartis it's important to mention that Novartis is delegating all these kind of R&D strategies to third parties. So that means a lot, because if the giants in pharma, they are making these assumptions, they are doing this kind of approaches, it's because the full market is moving towards this direction. So this is the context, this is the framework where we are nowadays. This is the reality, and this is the reasons that we are experimenting around the movement that the pharmaceutical companies, the pharma market is doing nowadays. So now we know which is the framework. We know now how the market, the pharmaceutical market, is changing, because there is a globalization that requests this change and requests this upgrade. We know nowadays that the pharmaceutical companies, the big ones, they are looking for something else than just manufacturing drugs. They are trying to look for a specific value that no one is able to do in order to be competitive in this market. Well, let's just start with the drug life cycle. So in the previous slide, I show you the period of time that we need, no, in order to cover the full life cycle. But this is the number of years that we think in order to have an approval in the US. We're talking about between 12 and 15 years since we start the first day making the research on a new drug. And how much money that doesn't mean? Well, we need to invest more or less, in average, $1 billion to put in the drug in the market. Well, this is huge figures, of course, but if we consider that in the real life, that means that we're talking about a third of a professional career of any of us. Could you think about that? So a third of our life dedicated to just one drug. And could you consider how many people can be hired with this salary for these 15 years? So this is amazing. And this schema is not competitive enough. So has been competitive so far because the patents allow that, because the gross margins that the pharmaceutical industries had so far, that was a possibility to go in this direction. But this is not valid anymore. Have you seen how many CROs and CDMOs we have in the landscape? There are many, many logos. And in the pharmaceutical industry, it's the same. Every day appears a new pharmaceutical company providing similar or biosimilar products that they are entering competence with the existing one. So this model, the classical model, doesn't work, cannot work in a global and competitive world. For this reason, this is the change that we have shown in the previous section. And these 15 years they are split between this sequence, no? And this is the usual way that we see the drug life cycle for a CRO. Classically, the complexity in drug development has increased many folds over the past 40 years, requiring preclinical testing, investigational new drugs. The investigational new drugs, we will see that this is END, but also the completed clinical testing before marketing approval from the FDA. Generally, new drugs application, and this is the NDA concept, the new drug applications or biological license applications, this is the BLA concept, are reviewed comprehensively before to be approved. And then drug performance is submitted to regulatory agencies for post-marketing studies. Okay, we are in this stage. This is the classical view about how CROs are interacting with these 15 years of life cycle of a drug. But if we think in terms of CDMOs and CROs, this is not valid neither. We cannot think about 15 years. We cannot think about billions of dollars invested in this process. We cannot start if we are a startup, if we are a country that we want to develop this kind of business. We cannot think in these terms. How we can make that profitable? How we can bring value to the society? If we think in these terms, in this sequence, step by step, it doesn't make sense. And this is how the pharmaceutical industry has been working year. And for this reason, they were investing a lot of money in every single research process. Which is the new view? Which is the new vision of that? From a CRO and CDMO perspective, this is what it makes sense. We shouldn't think in a sequential step. We need to think in this virtuous loop where every single step that we do for any specific drug or service that we offer, if we start with discovery or we start with preclinical research or whatever phase we want to start, we need always to share, to keep the information and data that we are producing, the knowledge, the explicit knowledge and the tacit knowledge that we have in every step. We need to share that with a core business, with a kernel that is centralizing this knowledge in order to introduce this virtuous loop. What does it mean, virtuous loop? It means that in every iteration that we do, every time that we make the same, we will improve our service, our task, our procedures internally to be better. So here the error is to do the same that the big pharma companies are doing nowadays. Every single project that they start from scratch. This is an error. They are working with different teams. They are working with different research people. They are working with different assets systems. They are working on different facilities. So we will see that if you are able to collect together the knowledge that you're producing step by step in order to centralize that, in order to don't create silos of data. And this is one of the main problems that we have nowadays in the pharmaceutical industry. They work with silos of data. They are not able to share the outcomes coming from one silo to another silo. If we are able to share that in a transparent way internally in our organization, in our CDMO, CRO organization, that will become as an added value for our society, because we'll be more efficient in the next iteration. And because the tacit knowledge that we have in this, let me say, in the step one, can be shared, can be useful for subsequent steps. So let me put a clear example about that. When you are delivering services as a CDMO or CRO, we are creating services or products from a previous stage to manufacturing, for example. Could you imagine how much difficult it is for pharmaceutical companies to make the scale up? Do you know how much time they need in order to, well, not only time, sorry, time and also resources. How many batches they have to throw to the trash because they are not having a good or fast or efficient scale up from lab to production? We're talking about hundreds of batches. So this is one of the added value as companies or as organizations or countries like you can add to the society. We can improve, we can be more efficient producing drugs since the early stages on the process. And this is something that nowadays, although there are many companies that they know that, they are not applying that because they are so huge and this is very difficult to change, not only in mindset, also in organizational structure. So they are completely split in departments, and each department, they have their own software, they have their own nodes, they have their own data silos, they have their own equipment, they have their own specialists, and they are not sharing this knowledge. So if we are able to bring another value as a CRO CDMO, providing this kind of scale-up facilities or tech transfer abilities in order to make faster and efficient this jump between lab and production, this is an enormous value that we can bring not only to the pharmaceutical companies, also to the society, because at the end, patients are paying for this drug, and the drug, at least in Europe, the price of the drug is based on the cost of the manufacturing processes. Well, I think that this is important because the difference between this graphic and this one, although we're talking about the same concepts, what we are describing here is really, really important. This kernel concept is key in order to bring added value from a CRO or CDMO perspective. Here we have the knowledge. Here we have the added value on the service. This is the example of the two transport companies that we were talking about regarding the added value. In this case, we are talking about the first phase, discovery and development. We will dedicate several slides in order to identify good points. In this case, we're talking about the target discovery. This is the early initial step, the target validation. So how to eliminate wrong assumptions that we can have, how we can generate new molecules or existing ones that can be repurposed. This is a drug, a type of drug that is nowadays being very expanded in the market, how to reuse the same drug for other purposes. And Also this preclinical development, how we can make analysis on animals and eliminate molecules that they are not in the target. In this case, we are talking about the screening hit. Well, the screening hit is the output. A component screen is typically termed a hit molecule, which has been demonstrated to have specific activities at the target protein. Screening hits from the basis of a lead optimization chemistry program is needed to increase the potency of the chemical series at the primary drug target protein. Well, how we can bring value in this kind of screening hits? How we can bring value in order to eliminate wrong targets? And how we can bring value in these advanced molecules in preclinical studies? Well, I will use different examples that we are living in the market, in the CDMO's market, and probably you can identify that with something that could be useful for you. For example, in the target identification and validation, there are many libraries, like probably you already know the genome CRISPR library is an open source library that is very well known in the academics and in universities, and also the Duolink PLA. They are very good source of tasks for drug discovery. But if you want other kind of, or you want to know other kind of tools, I will recommend you to look at the IDBS company that is offering an open library of molecules and also recorded adverse effects, for example, and recorded interactions with other medicines. In this case, only taking care about what kind of information we have in the bibliography is a very good and an excellent source of information in order to move forward, in order to accelerate the process. So regarding the timing that we are talking about, we were talking, if you remember, we were talking about 12, 15 years. And in this early stage, we're talking about in discovery and preclinical testing, we're talking about between 3 and 5 years. So every month that we can accelerate the process counts. And we can, believe me, as a CDMO and CRO, we cannot think in these terms. Only big pharma companies can think on these terms. We cannot offer the same that they are doing nowadays. We need to optimize that. So why not to use the libraries that we have already in the systems? So here we have, well, I say development, screening, and so on. But nowadays, in the high throughput screening, the HTS concept, nowadays, there are a lot of companies that they are using robotics and data preprocessing in order to make, let me say, brute force with all those data. So you have now a bibliography with thousands of reference regarding pharmacological adverse effects, or with interaction with other drugs. So just making brute force with all those data, you can accelerate a lot which kind of molecules are not good, or yes, or maybe they are good, or they are amplifying the effect that you are looking for, before to go to the clinical phase. So this is a very important mechanism to offer added value based on your knowledge. If you are in this discovery and development stage, it's a very good way to add value to the society, to your customer, to your outcome, in order to producing data processing and AI, in order to identify this kind of adverse effects or amplification of the results that you're looking for. For example, recently we discovered that a specific excipient is interacting with the principal ingredient, although it seems that it couldn't do that because it was accelerating a specific metabolism mechanism inside the organism. In this case, that has been possible because there is this bibliography and there is power computing enough in order to make this crunching of data. So here you can accelerate the process months. We're talking about months. Well, we have the hit to lead, so how to identify these small molecules that they could be the target that we're looking for. And we're talking about the lead optimization process. So how we can improve the potency and reduce the side effects. The same concept. So before to go to experimental testing using animals, this is the usual way to proceed. Imagine that you can make a previous screening just analyzing statistically with big data all those information that we have in the pharmacology bibliography that is open source for everyone, and this is there. Could you imagine how much could you accelerate the process? So you can optimize just deleting, just removing all those molecules that has been already identified as adverse effects, and you can point out, you can highlight all of them that has been demonstrated in some interaction that could amplify the optimal mechanism that you are looking for. So this is a very good way to proceed with APIs, with active pharmaceutical ingredients, in order to identify not only the molecule, is the most important, probably the recipe. So the percentage, how it can be combined with other ingredients, and so on. So drug discovery nowadays can be accelerated a lot with the existing knowledge that we have around the academical world. So I think that this CRISPR library and these Duoling sources are really good for drug discovery targets if you want to use that in your stage. And well, this complex fishbone graphic coming from Toyota is explaining very well how we can do drug repositioning. This is the topic that I mentioned before. Drug repositioning is something that nowadays big pharma companies are looking for. For example, during the COVID-19 pandemic, Gilead discovered that an existing drug that was used for another purpose was efficient in order to be as a treatment for patients of COVID. So this is the classic, nowadays this is the most classical drug repositioning outcome, and Gilead multiplied per, I think, 25 or something like that, the price of the drug when they discovered that. So this is the classical, nowadays the classical purpose of top big pharma companies. How we do that? Using new technologies, let me say in this case. Well, during discovery, we have the classical approach. So just making a design of experiments, trying to figure out which is the experiment that we want to target. But what about if we try to make not only design of experiments with real experiments? What happens if in your design of experiments, and this is something that I would like to share with you in a transparent way. What happens when you design a design of experiments, and in the corner of your experiments, you cannot do it, or you cannot do them because they are so extreme. We don't have resources enough. We don't know how to reproduce these conditions of in the corner of the experiments. We don't know how to achieve these experiments, or because they need a longer time in order to do that, because they are related to microbiologic topics. In this case, you can reproduce design of experiments using synthetic data. So you can demonstrate, you can accelerate, you can make your own approaches, creating these hybrid experiments where you are merging analytical experiments, chemistry and microbiological experiments, and also adding synthetic experiments. This is a very good way to proceed. It's very cheap. Believe me, it's very cheap, because you can create the synthetic experiments, transforming the analytical expressions, the hybrid methods, applying AI, statistical methods. And you can extrapolate these use cases, these normal use cases, towards the extreme or the corner cases that should always be in a DOE. This is related with the question, I think that was Fidel that was doing this question. What happened with the corner cases? what happens when the big pharma companies cannot do these corner cases. When a CRO, in this case, is providing these services as an added value, this is a plus, because big pharma companies cannot do it for different reasons. But you are now a specialist. You know very well how this system works. You can create hybrid systems that can emulate these corner cases. The other one is this in silico drug repositioning. So you have libraries for molecular docking. You can create transcriptional signatures in your gene libraries. You can make data mining, and using machine learning, you can create similarities. You can create the characteristics, attributes, and features of the protein that is being produced before it is produced. And that could happen in silico. So this is a very good example of how technology, how digitalization, and how drug manufacturing are going hand in hand in order to accelerate the process, in order to produce better drugs. So this is nowadays, that is working nowadays. AstraZeneca is a very good example. If you want to look to someone that is doing that nowadays in big pharma, AstraZeneca is the most advanced on this field. They already published in 2017 an article where they were describing how to emulate adverse effects, how to identify amplifications of expected results, just making data mining. And you are more interested in the article that I mentioned before, AI in ATMPs. I'm making a reference to an article published in 2021, where there AI published in Nature, where some research lab, they discovered how to create protein and specific protein based on AI, pure AI. And they created the foldering of proteins based on this algorithm. So that's possible today. And this is accelerating a lot the path in order to have drug manufacturing. So we were talking about the in silico drug repositioning, but this is for the discovery. But later on, you need to validate that. So how to validate that? Well, first of all, do you remember that we were talking in the loop, in the virtuous loop? So all these studies that they are public, and all these studies that you have already done in your company, in your institution, in your organization, all those studies must be always available in order to allow to create retrospective and retrospective studies based on the experience. Otherwise, you need to reinvent the wheel in every single project. So only when you have this data available, you can create this kind of meta-analysis, adding value on top of the research that you're doing. I mean, this is emerging a new layer of knowledge based on the existing interrelationship between something that seems that they are individual, they are unconnected, but they are, to be honest, they are connected. So you can create this molecular docking or making this transcriptional signature, merging the results of different studies. Okay. Well, later on, you do the classical approach. You can make the in vitro analysis, in vivo, in vitro, and finally the clinical trials. But here we have a very good accelerator in order to reduce this 2 to 5 years of stage. This is around step 1, discovery. Let's go to the step 2. Remember, please try to identify which is the field where you feel more comfortable with, and when you can expand as much as you can all the knowledge and all the capabilities that you have nowadays, thinking on this vision that you have regarding the CRO CDMO. In preclinical research, we are talking about how to move from in vivo to in silico clinical trials. What happens with this population that they are not covered? Usually, when we work with real patients making clinical trials. In silico clinical trials allow very easily to identify anomalies, even without just a few data. So there are very good algorithms that work with just a few data, able to identify this kind of anomalies. Well, the thing is that nowadays, companies and organizations, they are betting for moving from in vivo to in silico clinical trials. So at the end, of course, believe me, they cannot work only in silico, but in silico is very helpful when you have to quickly decide which kind of sample are more affected, or how to distribute the sample per ages, per gender, per race, per geographic area, whatever you need. So the architecture of the sample that you are going to use, the design of the experiments and the clinical trials that you are going to do, that could be done more efficient if you create or if you invest time at the beginning doing this research in silico and moving later in vivo, because the target and the design of the process is more clear and is more effective, and even more. And this is another added value that you can take notes in your notebook. When you go to your customer or the contractor, when you go to the contractor with a model developed in silico, offering a previous design based on this distribution harmonized by systems like AI, you are bringing a lot of value, because you are narrowing, you are reducing the time when you are targeting specifically the design that this drug is requesting for, or the target that you want to cover is well directed. So this is a very good way to add value when we talk about silico versus vivo. That doesn't mean that we're removing in vivo. Please, this is not the reality. We're accelerating the process in the contrary way. We start with silico in order to design the sample for in vivo. And this is different examples about how we can do that. So how we can simulate opportunities, for example, in this case for medical devices, no? Simulate the device or simulate the anatomy. There is in Europe, there are 2 or 3 companies already that they are simulating in pseudo in silico, because they are working with real organs, human organs. They are reproducing human body connected to an in silico process, and they are working with cells each organ. And they see how, for example, this drug is affecting to the lung or to the liver, depending on the injection of the drug, no, of the trial. Well, this is something real. So they are connecting cells, and they are connecting the cells to sensors with in silico processes managed by AI. And you can collect all this information on real time without to interact with patients. So you accelerate the process, you ensure the target. This is recent, in Frontiers. That was published in Frontiers 4 years ago. So we're not talking about science fiction, we're talking something real. We're still in preclinical research. Well, in this case, we have been talking about adverse effects, but also side effects. Here I'm highlighting this concept because I think that is something that we can add value when we think in a holistic approach for a CRO, CDMO, always thinking in the virtuous loop. So side effects, adverse effects can be detected before they happen in clinical trials, just crunching on numbers. Here we have also effects on gender, race, ethnic groups. So there are many aspects of the clinical trials that we are not covering when we go in vivo, making clinical trials physically, because cannot be done because we don't have this kind of patient in front of us. What happens if my patient is diabetic? What happens if my patient is suffering cancer? This kind of patients, if they are not included in the sample, we cannot provide this kind of information. We can do that analytically if we have data. This is something that we can bring value. Also, the absorption, distribution, metabolization and excretion of information that could be supported by digitalization. And the effectiveness compared to similar drugs. This is so important because this bullet point, when we're measuring the effectiveness compared to similar drugs, usually bring to a repositioning drug. And this is how Gilead discovered the benefits of the current drug for COVID. Okay. Well, pharmacokinetic and toxicity, efficacy, all these kind of tasks are usually related to preclinical research. And I don't know if you feel comfortable with these kind of topics in order to be offered as part of these services that you are thinking on. But if you think just in one of them, you are offering partially a partial service. So you are more attractive to your contractor when you are offering a linked sequence of steps where all of them together add an added value on top. Okay, so nowadays the smallest CROs or the smallest CDMOs, they are losing capacity and they are acquired or merged by biggers because the full or the key, the projects with final keys, I mean, when the project is delivered end to end, brings a value. More in preclinical research. Well, how we can bring value to our contractor, to our society, to our interaction. The thing is that when you are able to create this kind of silico or based on your knowledge, proof of concept or proof of principle, you are delivering a prototype. So when you are involved in a contract process with the contractor, I don't know if you have suffered that out of any time in your life, but this is very, very hard. You have to discuss regarding topics about, well, security, non-disclosure agreements. You have to sign out of privacy topics and so on. Well, you need to do a lot of pre-work when you are receiving this delivery from your contractor. What about if you transform this work that you have to do in any way, you transform that in a proof of principle or proof of concept? That means that you are simulating in some way the services that you are going to produce, you are going to deliver. And in this proof of concept, of this proof of principle, you are adding the same things that you have to do in an official, in a formal proposal. You're transforming this formal proposal into something tangible that your customer or your contractor at the end will find really valuable, because it's something tangible that they will see, they will identify as another value. They will identify something that is real. It's something that is real, that is not just a contract. That is very useful when you are starting the process. Once you are well established in the market and you are known and you have some activities, you have some contracts, this is not a problem because you will be a reference in the market. But what happens when you are starting? When you are opening the market? In this case, this is the best way to proceed. Deliver with the formal proposal a proof of principle, a proof of concept, where you are making something tangible to your customer. Okay. Well, the concept of in vivo, in vitro, or ex vivo assays, this is something that always will be needed, always. Nevertheless, at least in Europe, the in silico assays are more frequent, are considered like a real value for customers because it's not intrusive with the nature, so less animals are used for this kind of size, and in silico are always reproducible. This is a very good point. So when you create a model that is able to manage this kind of adverse effects or reactions with the drug, you need to save, you need to store, you need to keep this model in order to demonstrate the full traceability of the process. The silico assays are nice, let me say, a proof of concept, a proof of principle that the purpose and your formal proposal it makes a lot of sense. So not only from the green perspective, from the ambient perspective, the in silico analysis is something that is nowadays is taking more importance in the step 2. And when we talk about preclinical research, this is the kind of drug deliveries or the formats that we have to think about. So if you are good or you want to be a referent, the orally, on the topical, the parenteral, or whatever format you want to work with, you have to think about, if you want to be the reference on this specific one, you want to cover all of them, or you want to specify some of them. This is important to be focused before to start the strategy, because that will create your branding, your name, your reference in the market. There are different strategies. When you are big and you have a big brother, you can go to all of them and you can acquire the knowledge coming from different markets. Or if you have very, very good specialists, that could be the ownership of each of one. But otherwise, you should start from the topic that you are really a specialist, where you have a good knowledge, a deep knowledge, and moving forward, including others as far as you are organically growing up. This is the usual way to proceed. Regarding the formulation, optimization, and improving, in this case, I would say that formulation optimization is a let me say a good point, starting to bring value to your customers when you are delivering the secret of the skill up at the transfer. They will see in you, they will see in the knowledge that you are offering with the product or the services that you are delivering, where when the transparency that you are delivering in the product is part of the, let me say, the secret sauce, or the knowledge that you can bring on the process when you are part of the scaling up or you are part of the tech transfer. So how the companies work. Let me take the example of Moderna. When Moderna was delegating the COVID-19 vaccine into Lonza past year, they started signing a contract for one part of the production. But when Lonza demonstrated that they were really good making the tech transfer process and the scale-up process, Moderna subcontracted the full process of manufacturing for the COVID-19 vaccine for all Europe. Could you imagine what does it mean? For all Europe, because Lonza demonstrated that they were really good making this tech transfer. Otherwise, Moderna could follow the same procedure that, for example, follow Pfizer when they delegated in different companies, different parts of the processes. But for example, for packaging, I will delegate the process for packaging, for cryo packaging to this company. For the for vials preparation, for this one, for filling to other company. And the scale up and the tech transfer is so difficult. When you demonstrate a huge value in the formulation, considering relevant factors, not only CPPs or not only CQAs are included in this process. We will see that in detail later. But when you consider the full process with all the factors involved in the process, because you have a deep knowledge on that, that means that you are being required for the rest of processes, and you're establishing a relationship with your contractor as a partner, not like a provider. A partner means that you are adding value on top of the services that you are offering. And tech transfer, believe me, scale up and tech transfer are one of the most important problems that biopharmaceuticals companies they have nowadays, because they need to manage the process between different CMOs, CDMOs, and CROs, and delegating in each of them a part of the production. And this is a headache, believe me. This is very difficult to manage that with different suppliers. But if you are adding this on top, how to do that, how to make this transfer easily, considering all the mechanistics, all the analytics, all the real factors, not only for the, let me say, and not only for dimensionless approach. This is not everything. When you make tech transfer scale up, usually labs are making a dimensionless task. This is not all of that. We need to include seasonality. We need to include external factors like humidity. These kind of things are so crucial. If you are a real expert on that, you will be the key suppliers for big pharma companies. And that starts in step 2, in preclinical research. Okay, let's go to the step 3. Step 3, clinical development. Now we are offering a lot of added value. We have seen how to add value using digital tools or making use of libraries, open source libraries, where we have genetic, genomic, and metabolic information, and we can cross all those data in order to create new adverse effects or to detect amplifiers on the process in order to eliminate wrong molecules in advance, in order to reduce the time for clinical and preclinical trials, creating this design of the sample. So we have seen all these kind of things. Now we are in clinical development. So we have to tackle with the complexity that means. I don't know how many times you have been involved in the design of an study, but not only the cost, not only the economical resources that you need, also the complexity around managing data to be rigorous in the sampling, as we mentioned before, how to include the gender, the age, the race, all the human aspects that are required in order to have a good sample. We found that with the mRNA vaccine during the COVID-19 pandemic. The drug, the vaccine is not affecting in the same way to the Nordic race and to the other kind of races. So people has been affected in a different way. We didn't have this study well designed. The complexity of the human body requires this kind of sampling or design very well established. So this kind of complexity is, again, another value when we complement the design with, or the physical design with real patients with in silico patients. So we can offer not only a more rigorous proof of concept in advance, also during the project, we can identify which kind of mechanisms can affect more or less to a specific subsample inside the trial. And well, other topics that could be affected by a digital, or could be improved by a digital approach, would be the dose escalation. This is very related with how to split these clinical trials between children and adults. The dose escalation is so crucial in these aspects. It's the same. Well, on the other hand, it's important to mention the privacy. How to manage this data? Are you good managing, let me say, privacy and security information? Do we have the mechanism, the digital mechanisms, in order to manage this information in a secure way? So this is another value that we can bring to our contractor. If you demonstrate that you are, for example, I don't know, ISO 27 compliance. I know that in Cuba, for example, we have the equivalent. So if we are compliant with the security topics, we are compliant with EPA. We are EPA compliance in terms of privacy. If you are able to demonstrate that to your contractor, you have another check in the checklist that at the end will be decisive in order to be elected. So everything related with this kind of data management, not only in terms of research or data crunching, also in terms of security and privacy. If you are good and you can demonstrate that you are good on that will be another checklist in the section. So we're not talking now just about pharmacokinetics concepts or knowledge. We're talking about the digitalization that we need around the process. And this is how we're introducing the concept now. The digitalization, the level of maturity of the digitalization in your infrastructure would be another decision point for the contractor. Why? Because you will be more transparent, you will be more efficient, and everything will be audited in a good way. Okay? So please don't consider, when you are offering this kind of services, don't consider medical supporters or healthcare supporters that they are doing the follow-up with the volunteers, making this control using paper, because otherwise you will be dead in the race. This is something that probably it's clear, but is something real nowadays. Contractors, they are not accepting anymore documentation in paper when you're talking about clinical trials studies. So this is so crucial. And if you are doing that using your own platform, your own digital platform, you have to validate this platform in terms of these concepts, not only in terms of quality, also in terms of security and privacy. But at the same time, this is another value. More. Now we're talking about phase 2 and phase 3. In this case, we're increasing the number of patients from 100 order of magnitude towards 1,000 order of magnitude. Well, probably you have been involved in this kind of trials, but if you don't, believe me, this is the most crazy part of the clinical trial process. How to manage all those information. When the doctor that is collecting the data is interviewing the patients, are taking notes by hand, and afterward they are transcribing this handwritten data to a system, spreadsheets or whatever, they are breaking the data chain. They are breaking the value of keeping full and agnostic, let me say, treatment of data, following the principles of data management that has been accepted everywhere. So we're talking about ALCOA. ALCOA is the acronym of data must be always attributable, legible, contemporaneous, original, and accurate. So when you are making transcription from paper to digital, you are breaking the data chain. And that could occur that if you have an audit that is not approved by the contractor. So that means that you have to think, if you are thinking of offering these services, you have to think in how to manage the full life cycle of the data that you are gathering in a good way, in a regulated way. This is so crucial. Data in this step is oil. Okay, so this is, for example, how Pfizer discovered the second effect of the Viagra, because, well, there are some notes that the doctors were collecting using digital systems, and they crossed the data and they realized that several patients were not returning the excellence of the pills. Well, this is something that can be detected automatically if you are managing the data in a proper way. Okay, so we are thinking about thousands and hundreds of records where any kind of minimum clue of a secondary or an adverse effect must be detected easily and quickly. Otherwise, you're going to need to extend the clinical trial process, and this is so long. So for this reason, it's so important to have all data digitalized. Okay. Well, more things that you have to think is, if you are planning to develop this service or clinical development, well, maybe you can think out how to manage that in terms of distribution of the trials, the trial drug, and also how to create the chain between all the shipment process. So this is really critical, no? More things. Well, Probably you are very good in pharmacokinetics, so I cannot add more value here. But in this case, just let me reiterate again that the process that you can accelerate merging data using existing open source information in reference is a very good way to accelerate the process. But also establishing the drug, the metabolite stability. So the stability process is one of the most, is the longer processes. So you need to demonstrate that the stability of this drug is whatever it is. So what happens when the yield or the efficiency or the activity of this product is decaying, is going down during 1 year or 2 years? You have to create this sample library. You need to establish this decay of the process and the efficiency of the process. Well, the stability can be accelerated, and that is a very good service also for CROs, simulating this kind of adverse conditions. You can accelerate the degradation of the products using mechanisms like, for example, putting an infrared or destroying or applying UV rays, or even creating analytical expressions using AI. You can accelerate and simulate the stability of a process. That is another service that can be provided with an added value, because you are shrinking, you are compressing the time for the final drug delivery. Here I have some of the rules that we need to consider. To be HIPAA compliant is so critical if you want to be in this field, in this arena. If you want to work in clinical development, you have to think seriously to be HIPAA compliant. This is so important. Of course, we will talk about good clinical practices. We will talk about that in the next session. But this is crucial. Well, now we are in the step 4, regulatory agencies review. Well, the thing is that, which is the timeline? We have to interact with regulatory agencies. It's true that you need to work, you need to interact with the local agencies, and for sure, nowadays, you are going to need to interact with external agencies to your country. In the Europe, we need to work with EMA, and afterwards with the FDA. In Cuba, it's the same. We need to interact with the Cuban agency, and later on, if we want to go forward and out, we need to interact with the FDA. Well, the case is that we are talking about the ENDs, the NDAs, and the biological licenses. We are talking about all those concepts with regulatory agencies. So they have to rely on your job. So your customer is not only your contractor. And this is something that you have to have clear in your mind. Your customer is not the contractor, is not only the contractor, is also the regulatory agency. And you have to be happy with both. You have to deliver the optimal product to both institutions, companies and institutions. And you need to be transparent with both. And the good strategy is never go alone to the regulatory agencies. So you have to have the agreement with your contractor previously in order to defend the same position. This is very important, because you will have to take critical decisions. How to move forward with in silico trials, how to move forward with a DOE that has been completed with the corner cases using synthetic data, how to, whatever decision you have that is not classical, let me say, that you don't have reference in advance, and they are an added value for your customer, you need to go hands on hand with your customer to the regulatory agencies in order to defend the same position. Only in this moment, you will see more strength, more power in front of the decision that you want to demonstrate that is valid. This is very important, because they are bringing value to the customer when they defend alone in front of the regulation, whatever topic they need. So the new drug, the methodology, the decisions that they took is in the contrary case. So the contractors will be more happy if you ask them to be present during the process and to prepare the audit and the submission together. This is very important. This is another value, even more. So in this way, you can accelerate the approval. How to accelerate the approval? Well, the regulation requires their own time. Nowadays, we will see that in a graphic that I have. The FDA is approving a lot of new drugs based on precise and personalized medicine. The 42% of increase of this kind of drugs has been introduced to the FDA. And less they are approving classical drugs. But if you are in the CRO stage, you need this approval and you need to create shorter periods of time for this approval. So that means that you have to prepare everything in order to be sure that at the right time, and the first time, you have everything completed and well prepared. Otherwise, the review is taking a lot of time. So if you want to be an excellent CRO or an excellent CDMO and you work in this research and development stage, it's very valuable to have in your team someone coming from the FDA, someone coming from the regulatory bodies, in order to work together or simulate together the process. Maybe that you can think that a simulation or a simulation could be 1 month of delay, but this month could accelerate 1 year, because the review, when you have to fix something, is requires more time than just the right at the first time. Okay, so here I like to bring some reasons for a drug failure. When a drug failure is when a submission is failing from a regulatory perspective. Well, toxicity is one of the main topics that the regulators are looking at. So that means that if your sample is not well covered in terms of toxicity, the submission will be rejected. Okay, so this is one of the main topics that the regulatory bodies they are looking at. Also the efficacy. So the proportion, you have to consider what happens with all the age distribution in the proportion of the medicine. So it's so critical. Okay. Well, the bioavailability, the pharmacokinetics, and so on, they are other ones. But the main ones are toxicity and efficacy. Post-market. Well, now we're lucky we have the approval from the regulatory bodies. Which is the next sequence or the next service that we can offer as CRO CDMO? Well, the post-market monitoring. That means that we need to surveil, we need to create this pharmacovigilance process where we are monitoring continuously what's happening with the drug that is already in the market. Okay, so that means that one service that you can offer as a very good service is the recall, for example. Recalling is a very good service that you can offer to your customers or your contractors. Okay. Well, challenges and opportunities. The thing is that this is part of the reality that we were describing in the framework during the first presentation. Big pharma companies are moving from small molecules to biologics, to cell gene therapies, to ATMPs. So large molecules are also included in the CDMO CROs market, let me say. But when we talk about vaccines, for example, when we talk about parenteral drugs, when we talk about we talk about large molecules, the complexity that is around this bio drug is something that big pharma companies wants to delegate. And also, of course, small molecules, because the small molecules is something that requires a machinery, an asset, a facility that is well established and is not adding value to big pharma companies. But in terms of large molecules, complexity is something that they want to delegate. In terms of added value, we're talking about the scale up. Do you remember the scale up difference? Well, in this case, this challenge that is a real problem for pharmaceutical companies would be an opportunity for CDMOs and CROs. Which is the difference? The difference is that when big pharma companies, they need to make a tech transfer on a scale up from, let me say, Brussels, from Belgium to Singapore. This is a real case coming from Pfizer. When they want to apply, they want to productize this drug in Singapore, after having the approval in Belgium, they need at least 3 years in order to make the fine tuning in the equipment. 3 years in order to make a scale up and a tech transfer. This is too much time. So how you can bring value? The problem with these big pharma companies is that they are working in a very data silos way. They are not working in a transparent way between the departments. And every single product, it starts again with different teams, with acquisitions. They are evolving. They are very dynamic in terms of selling companies or headquarters or whatever. That doesn't happen in CDMOs. You are working with the knowledge very well established. So you are managing very well this knowledge, and your experience can be maximized in terms of lab towards production, in terms of classical factors like CPPs or CQAs that you want to achieve, to real key factors involved in the process. So this scale up, this tech transfer concept is a real added value that big pharma companies, they are forcing to manage that externally, because they cannot afford 3 more years in order to adapt one drug process to an equipment to another different one. So when you are able to add that in your proof of concept, when you are able to demonstrate that your ability to know very well the process brings an opportunity to them, is in this moment when you are transforming a challenge into an opportunity. And I would like to bring, as part of the last slide of this section, this graphic. This graphic is the Pharma 4.0 concept that was created by ISPE several years ago. And this is let me say, how the pharmaceutical industry is understanding nowadays the transition between the classical pharma approach to the new one. Maybe we have in our mindset that Pharma 4.0 means digitalization, means how we can transform processes into data. Yes, and we're right, but not only that. So as you can see in the graphic, in this box, IT system digitalization, integration, traceability is not only the unique side or the unique perspective for Pharma 4.0. We need also culture. And when we say culture, it means communication, decision-making based on this communication and this transparency between data, and also the organizational process. So how we can demonstrate that we have full control of the process, and no, we're not talking about statistical control. This is the classical one. We're talking about multivariate control. So if you want to bring added value to your contractor, we cannot think in a classical approach considering my control variable by variable, because in the reality, we have an interaction, a continuous interaction between the variables that we are managing. So that means that we need an holistic control, an holistic strategy to manage the full process end to end. That means that if you want to read an interesting guidance, the ICH-Q10 is a very good one, where the ICH, the International Harmonization Consortium, are describing how to manage the drug product life cycle from a full and holistic quality perspective. This is really, really good. The ICHQ10 is it's a very good read for nights. But so we're talking about IT, of course, but not only IT, culture, organization, but what about resources? What about, we cannot think only in digitalization. We need to think also in a qualification, in a quality department, in a regulatory affairs department, in a validation department, well aligned with the same principles. We can work at labs, we can work in our research teams with a advanced software, advanced power computing in order to create this crunching of numbers. But if our validation team is still working in paper, we will lose the power when we go to the market, because audits not, and when I say market, I say contractor and also regulators. When they come to our institution in order to have audits, if they see that we are advanced, digitalized, and controlling the knowledge very well in the lab, but the regulatory teams, compliance teams, they are not well aligned, that will be a -1 in the selection or in the image that our market will have about us. So everything needs to be between these two layers. We need to demonstrate a digital maturity in terms of culture, organization, systems, procedures, operational procedures, and the data integrity that we are ensuring, not only in terms of quality of the data or quality of the process that we are using in order to manage data, backups, disaster recovery plan, and so on, also in terms of security and privacy for our patients. Everything is around this topic. So you will be an electable CDMO, CRO in front of the rest of competitors when you are able to demonstrate that you are mature enough, that you are able to demonstrate this value in a transparent way regarding data integrity in terms of the 4 axes of the value of what pharma is looking for. So at the end, the market is looking for a connected health. This is the final goal. We are not talking about drug manufacturing processes to be optimus from all the supply chain process, since research and development till distribution and logistics, until we don't have the final connection with the patient and with the medical healthcare system. Because remember, one of the services that we can offer is also pharmacovigilance and the final stage when the drug is in the market. So we need a connected health. And if you're offering the pharmacovigilance service and you're offering a platform where all the potential actors, doctors, medicals, pharmacists, even patients, can enter their inputs, their feedback in a transparent and in a digital mechanism, you are establishing this connection. And this is what the regulatory bodies are looking for. The regulatory bodies, they think always in the patient, and we should always think also in the patient. And this is how we can bring value, connecting the tasks that we are doing to our contractor, thinking on patients. Well, we have here more topics. The CPV, the continuous process verification, process automation, is something that if you are a CMO or CDMO and you want to expand the M of this acronym, the manufacturing, you should take care about that. So when you are able to control the process continuously, you will be in a good shape to make these continuous manufacturing processes. In this way, you will be able to control statistically in a multivariate perspective all the process.